What if I told you a band built from the ruins of Deep Purple, Iron Butterfly, and Johnny Winter's group made one of the greatest albums of the 1970s, and almost no one heard it? They opened for Black Sabbath. Duane Allman personally vouched for them. Their album cover literally moved in your hands. Then their label tried to turn them into a southern rock band, and everything collapsed. This is the story of Captain Beyond, the supergroup that destroyed itself before the world caught on. It was 1971, and the psychedelic era was curdling into something darker and heavier. Bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath had already redrawn the map of rock and roll. FM radio was expanding. Album-oriented rock was beginning to reshape how people listened to music, and audiences were hungry for something that rewarded deeper attention. Into this landscape came four veterans who had each, in their own way, been pushed out of the bands that defined their careers. The story began with Iron Butterfly coming apart in the early 1970s. When founder Doug Ingle left, guitarist Larry Reinhardt and bass player Lee Dorman were left looking for a new direction. For those two men, it opened a door. Reinhardt was no ordinary guitarist. He had joined Iron Butterfly during the Metamorphosis era, bringing a style that blended bluesy grit with jazz-like precision. Dorman was the melodic anchor of the rhythm section, a bassist who had always wanted something more demanding than his past. Together, they began envisioning a project that moved away from the Butterfly sound entirely. Something more cosmic, more technically rigorous, more ambitious. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. They found their vocalist in Rod Evans, the original frontman of Deep Purple. Evans had sung on the band's first 3 albums and delivered their breakthrough hit, Hush, before being replaced by Ian Gillan in 1969 when Deep Purple shifted toward a harder direction. Evans had relocated to the United States and was looking for a way back into rock. The final piece was Bobby Caldwell, a drummer whose reputation was already strong among musicians. Caldwell had recently served as the rhythmic engine behind Johnny Winter, and his work there had established him as one of the more explosive percussionists of the era. He was drawn to this new project by the promise of creative freedom and the chance to write complex, multi-layered arrangements. These were not 4 hungry unknowns scratching for a break. These were battle-tested professionals, survivors of bands already tied to heavy rock history. There were even stories that Duane Allman had taken an interest in their early demos, adding to the buzz around the project and helping connect them to a record label. Captain Beyond entered the rock world looking like a band destined for bigger things. In July 1972, Captain Beyond released their self-titled debut album. It arrived like nothing else on the market, and that was both its greatest strength and its earliest warning sign. Unlike most rock albums of the era, which were collections of individual songs separated by silent gaps, the Captain Beyond debut was designed to flow as a connected listening experience. Tracks moved into one another, linked by recurring musical motifs and complex time signature changes that felt closer to a classical suite than a standard hard rock record. This approach was already common in progressive rock, but Captain Beyond applied it to a sound far heavier than anything Yes or Genesis was producing. Songs like Dancing Madly Backwards and Mesmerization Eclipse showcased a level of technical interplay that few bands could match. Bobby Caldwell's drumming was particularly staggering. He wove Latin percussion, vibes, and bells into a framework of crushing rock intensity without ever sounding cluttered. The guitar work of Larry Reinhardt cut between bluesy urgency and atmospheric precision. Beneath it all, Lee Dorman's bass provided a melodic foundation that gave even the heaviest passages a sense of breathing, living structure. There was also a strange alchemy in the recording itself. Sessions took place at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles, and a long-standing studio legend claims that the monitors were wired out of phase during tracking, creating an unusually immersive stereo field where the instruments seemed to exist in 3-dimensional space. Whether accident or intention, the result was one of the most distinctive sounding heavy rock records of the decade. I'm not sitting on a golden gate. Then there was the cover. The record label made an enormous investment in its presentation, utilizing a 3-dimensional lenticular printing process that made the astronaut on the cover appear to float and shift as the sleeve was tilted. For anyone who walked into a record store in the summer of 1972, that cover stopped them cold. It was a visual statement of pure ambition, the label signaling that they believed they had something extraordinary on their hands. Critics agreed. The debut was immediately recognized as something rare, a heavy rock album that possessed genuine musical sophistication without sacrificing power or atmosphere. Musicians who heard it were astonished. Underground audiences became obsessed. The album peaked at number 134 on the Billboard 200, a commercial disappointment by any measure. But that number did not tell the whole story. The debut's true impact was measured not in chart positions, but in the reverence it earned from the people who mattered most. Serious musicians, dedicated collectors, and the devoted rock fans who had followed each member from their previous bands. They knew they had heard something that pointed toward the future. They just could not get enough of the world to listen. By late 1972, Captain Beyond was positioned to break into the top tier of American rock. The landscape was shifting in their favor. FM radio was rapidly expanding its reach. Audiences were hungry for album-oriented music that rewarded deeper listening. And the commercial explosion of heavy rock had shown that technically ambitious music could sell. The band was thrust into the touring circuit, opening for some of the biggest names in the business. They appeared on the Alice Cooper tour and shared stages with Black Sabbath, exposing their technical prowess to audiences that craved volume and intensity. Their connection within the record industry also placed them alongside the Allman Brothers Band on some dates, though the musical contrast between the acts could be jarring. For crowds who had come expecting slide guitars and Southern soul, the Allman connection ran deeper than booking convenience. The band's debut had been linked in industry lore to Duane Allman's interest, and his name carried weight around the Southern rock landscape. Within the industry's inner circle, that credibility mattered. Captain Beyond was not being discussed as a promising new act. They were being discussed as a serious contender. On paper, they had every ingredient: the musicianship of Deep Purple, the cosmic mystique that early Black Sabbath had pioneered, the progressive ambition that Rush was still years from fully realizing, a visual identity that set them apart from every other heavy band on the circuit. Everything about the moment suggested this band was about to break wide open. And then the cracks started showing. The beginning of the end could be traced to their relationship with the record label that they had started with. Phil Walden's label was one of the most successful in America at the time, but its identity was closely tied to Southern rock, a genre defined by blues-based jams, slide guitars, and a down-home aesthetic that was generating huge returns through the Allman Brothers and the Marshall Tucker Band. Captain Beyond was not that kind of band. As the debut album failed to approach the sales figures of Eat a Peach or Brothers and Sisters, people around the label reportedly pushed for something more commercial and easier to market to the core audience. Larry Reinhardt's response became one of the band's most famous quotes: "You signed a blonde, and now you want a brunette." The point was clear. They were not about to turn into a different band just to fit a marketing plan. The conflict poisoned the environment. Promotion cooled, and the band felt increasingly isolated from the very label that had signed them. Then came a major setback. Bobby Caldwell left in late 1972 to join Rick Derringer's group. He took with him a level of drumming precision and compositional sophistication that was difficult to replace. One of the more notorious stories from the period describes Captain Beyond being booked as the opening act for Sha Na Na at a large outdoor show in New York's Central Park. Whether every detail was remembered exactly as it happened is hard to prove. But the point of the story is clear. The band was placed in a setting that did not suit them, and the crowd reacted badly. The image of an adventurous space rock band playing to an audience expecting nostalgia rock tells you almost everything you need to know about the disconnect. It was humiliating, and it became a symbol of how badly the band's management and booking choices had missed the mark. By 1973, Captain Beyond was a band in survival mode, trying to record a second album under conditions that made genuine creativity nearly impossible. With Bobby Caldwell gone, the search for a replacement drummer became an ordeal. The band initially hired Brian Glasscock, but producer George Gomelski pushed for changes during the sessions. They eventually moved on to Marty Rodriguez, but the disruption had already fractured the momentum. A keyboardist and a percussionist were added, pushing the music toward a Latin-influenced jazz fusion style that felt less like a natural evolution and more like a sign of instability. The situation with Rod Evans grew worse throughout the recording process. At one point, he left the band and returned to England before coming back to finish the album. By the end, he was no longer fully invested in the project. The voice was there, the commitment was not. Sufficiently Breathless arrived in 1973 and, in a final irony, actually charted higher than the debut, reaching number 90 on the Billboard 200. But the numbers meant little without real promotion, and the label gave the album far less attention than the band had hoped. The company that had invested heavily in the debut's presentation treated the follow-up with indifference. The band found themselves touring behind a record they no longer believed in, playing to audiences who barely knew their name. By Christmas of 1973, Rod Evans had had enough. He left the band permanently and stepped away from the music industry. Reports later placed him in Northern California, living a quiet life and working outside the rock world. Captain Beyond attempted to continue. Various lineup reformations followed through the mid-1970s, and a third album, Dawn Explosion, appeared in 1977, with Bobby Caldwell returning to the drum kit. But the momentum was gone, the magic had dissipated, and the audience that should have been theirs had moved on to other bands and other scenes. For a generation of fans who remembered Rod Evans as the voice of Hush and the cosmic soul of Captain Beyond, his disappearance became one of rock's quietest mysteries. He did not flame out publicly. There was no dramatic breakdown, no farewell tour, no long final interview. He simply slipped out of the public eye, and the music world moved on. Evans spent the late 1970s living quietly in Northern California, working outside the industry and keeping a low profile. For years, he remained largely off the radar. No recording sessions, no cameos, no attempt to trade on his history with Deep Purple. For a man who had once stood at the microphone before thousands of people, the silence was striking. Then, in 1980, someone found him. A promoter operating under the company name Advent Talent Associates approached Evans with a proposition. The real Deep Purple had been gone for years. There was obvious demand for a reunion tour, and Evans, as an original member, could serve as the frontman for a new lineup. It was presented as a comeback, a chance to return to the stage and reconnect with audiences. Evans agreed. The musicians assembled around him had no connection to the classic Deep Purple lineup that fans remembered. They were hired hands, put together to recreate the image and sound of the famous Mark II era. Exactly how much Evans understood about the situation has been debated ever since. The tour began in May 1980. What followed was a catastrophe that would end Rod Evans' music career. The shows were disasters from the start. Audiences arrived expecting Ritchie Blackmore's guitar work and Ian Gillan's operatic power. Instead, they found a touring band fronted by Rod Evans, performing watered-down versions of Deep Purple songs. At the Long Beach Arena, the crowd turned hostile. Booing rolled through the venue. Objects were thrown. The performances collapsed under the pressure, and the audiences grew angrier in response. The management of the real Deep Purple reacted swiftly. They filed a lawsuit in Los Angeles Federal District Court to protect their brand from what they viewed as fraudulent misrepresentation. The promoters had structured the venture to shield themselves from liability, leaving Evans exposed when the case came to court. In 1981, the court ruled against him. The damages awarded to the real Deep Purple organization totaled $672,000. Evans had no means to pay such a sum. The judgment was devastating. He lost access to future royalties tied to his Deep Purple recordings, including the songs that had helped launch one of rock's greatest bands. The ruling made it effectively impossible for Evans to work in the music industry again. Any future earnings could be claimed against the debt. He returned to obscurity, and this time the retreat was permanent. When Deep Purple was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2016, Evans did not attend. His former bandmates said they had no way to reach him, and some were unsure whether he was still alive. Rod Evans simply disappeared from public life. Not in death, but in the most complete kind of disappearance a person can manage while still breathing. the fate of Captain Beyond's remaining members unfolded with a quieter kind of tragedy. Larry Reinhardt continued working on smaller projects through the 1970s and into the 1980s, but his career was badly slowed by a severe fall that injured his left hand. The injury kept him from playing for a time and limited what he could do afterward. He eventually returned to music, but the momentum he had carried into Captain Beyond never really came back. He passed away in January 2012 in Florida from complications related to liver disease. Lee Dorman, his longtime creative partner from the Iron Butterfly days, followed him in death 9 months later. The two men who had survived the collapse of one band and built something genuinely visionary together had both slipped away within the same year, their stories ending as quietly as the band they had created. Bobby Caldwell remained the lone active survivor of the original lineup. He continued to perform with various incarnations of Captain Beyond over the years, keeping the music alive for a devoted cult following that refused to let the legacy fade. The man who had been the band's rhythmic soul became its keeper, carrying the flame for all four of them. For a band that sold relatively few records and disappeared before most casual fans ever discovered them, Captain Beyond's influence proved remarkably durable. Modern critics have often identified the debut album as one of the early landmarks of proto-metal and stoner rock. The blend of heavy riffs, psychedelic atmosphere, and technical complexity that define those recordings can be heard in later bands that pushed heavy music in more adventurous directions. The debut became the kind of record that musicians, collectors, and deep-dive rock fans passed around like secret knowledge. The original 1972 vinyl, pressing with the lenticular three-dimensional cover, became a holy grail for record collectors. A mint-condition copy could command a substantial price. For the generation that bought the album originally, it remained a tangible artifact of a futuristic past that never quite arrived. The proof of a revolution that almost happened. And maybe that's exactly why the story of Captain Beyond still fascinates rock fans decades later. Because you can still hear, in every groove of that debut record, exactly what could have been. Captain Beyond had the pedigree, the sound, and the moment. Four musicians who survived the collapse of legendary bands built something extraordinary, then watched it fade under the weight of label confusion, bad timing, and an industry that never really understood them. The music endured, the band did not. What's your memory of Captain Beyond? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's greatest era.